Hi, and welcome to What's the Tea and L&E. I'm Leah, and today I'm here with my guest, Josh Wykle. Josh is a member of our tax team here at the firm, and I wanted to have Josh on to talk about the big, beautiful bill and some tax implications that have come about for employers and employees. So, Josh, I have heard that you can now deduct overtime from your income, overtime pay.
That is correct. You can deduct up to $12,500 on your own. If you're married and your wife is not or husband is not working, you can deduct up to $25,000.
So this means that if before, right, if I made, $40,000 a year and $12,500 of that came from overtime pay, I can now my income is now only going to be taxed on the 40,000 minus
That is
12,500.
correct. So the $12,500 is still going to show up as income off the top, but you get what's called an above the line deduction to take it off before you get to your adjusted gross income for which it's based on.
All right. So something that's interesting that came up is I had a DOL investigation for a client recently, and I was looking at this company's pay stubs, and they said, employee A makes X amount per hour, and here's what they made for the week. And then they had another line on the pay stub that said miscellaneous pay. And in that was a lump sum of everything from overtime to bonuses to commissions. So what's an employer's obligation with regard to the documentation that it has to provide an employee to show that that this amount comes from overtime?
That's right. That's a great question. The deduction cannot be taken unless the employee has provided a statement from the employer. And the employer is required under the Internal Revenue Code, Section 6041D.
Of course, he's gonna cite statutes. He's a tax lawyer, guys. I'm sorry.
So the employer should be doing this anyway, but it's to protect the employee on audit, so that they can point to the statement and say, "This is my specific amount of overtime pay."
All right. So what about, in addition to overtime, what about tips? If I'm a tip worker, I'm a valet driver, work at a restaurant, can I deduct my tips?
Absolutely. Again, we've got that magic threshold of $25,000 that we can get up to. And again, the employer needs to provide that statement that sets it forth. Now, if the statement isn't provided, then that just means that either they have not included the tips in the income or they're not considering that income as being tips.
So what's kind of interesting about this, right, is, if an employer is looking at moving someone from maybe a salaried position to a non-exempt position where that person is going to get overtime. In my experience, a lot of times employees will say, hey, that's a hit to my ego, right? I wanted to keep making my salary. But now if they get overtime or a significant amount of their money is coming from tips, that can actually be a benefit to an employee from a tax perspective. Is that fair to say?
Yes, absolutely. Maybe there's some tips that are off the record, but now it's specifically
There's always tips off the record.
So let's just address that. But 25,000 is a pretty nice amount. This is also timely too, because the Treasury Department just issued proposed regs a couple weeks ago listing about 70 different specific occupations for which tips are allowed. The issue of what kind of job was eligible for a tip was a little nebulous, and they said it related back to anything prior to this act that you would get a tip for. Now that's, again, we don't know, but now we've got a specific list of 70 different jobs.
Awesome. Well, this would be a great time to make sure you're doing those pay audits and think about how you can rework an employee's pay in a way to actually benefit them from a tax perspective, so their take home is a lot larger.
One last point, though. The tips that are mandated on large parties, or you're just going to add it anyway, those are not eligible. It has to be a completely voluntary tip.
Oh, like those service fees and stuff.
So think about the service fees, parties of 6 or more. Those are not eligible under this law.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Josh. We really appreciate your time today.
Happy to be here.